Mr. Jeffrey Gordon. How you doing today, sir?
Doing well. How are you?
Jeffrey, I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. I want to know this first before really getting anything too serious. Have you ever encountered somebody who has a characteristic or trait, we'll say, that isn't maybe ideal for their job?
Sure. Yeah, I would say so. Definitely when dealing in customer service, I can think of a few recent circumstances where that would be the case.
Fair enough. For me, Jeffrey, I ran into a lady at the DMV who was overly loud. Like I said, mentioning all my nice personal information for everybody sitting waiting to hear. And it's like,
Nice.
no, it's not an ideal situation, but it's like if you could just talk a little quieter so everybody doesn't know where I live, that would be fantastic.
Right. Yeah,
Um,
she just didn't have an inside voice.
yeah, no, not at all. And I thought that was interesting. Just an interesting clash of abilities. That's all. Well, I wanted to move that over to the world of insurance and sort of talk to you about sort of people and their abilities and sort of what you focus on and where you sometimes maybe see people in the industry not have skills line up to their strengths and again, knowledge and all that fun stuff. You focus on a relatively specialized area of insurance. And I just didn't know how you come across, when you're looking to bring in new folks and their abilities to sort of handle that area.
Yeah, yeah. So like you said, we're in the trucking niche is what our agency does. It's kind of the primary focus, which isn't something that you just pick up. I've been transportation agent for probably better 15 years now. So it's just what I do and what I talk, but you can obviously tell those that are fearful of it or intimidated by it. It is a learning curve, but it's not that complicated once you understand the basics of it. So finding people to recruit into the industry, usually I look for somebody that's in the transportation world, that can talk trucking, whether it be from a dispatch company, a truck sales, just somebody that kind of knows the industry, because I always say the insurance is the easy part. It's knowing these type of people, knowing the things they deal with, from the rates that they're seeing, or regulation or equipment issues. They have so much, so it's kind of knowing their industry. The insurance is the easy part to teach. It's just being able to relate to what they do is kind of the difficult.
Now, I would take a guess and say most agents not involving themselves in transportation on a day to day might find that surprising that the insurance part of it is easy. And they're thinking, well, what have I been doing this whole time that I can't figure it out? And then I'm going
Yeah.
to ask you, Jeffrey, what is the secret then and why is it so easy?
Sure. Well, I mean, when you so go high level, what's the coverage? Liability, okay, for if they do damage to others, their own equipment. So our comprehensive collision coverages, our cargo we're carrying for others. Then if we have a yard or a terminal, general liability for trip and fall, work comp. That's your basic coverage there. So it's really the same whether they're a pharmaceutical, distribution company, or any other type of retail shop that has employees out on the road. The insurance is the insurance. I think what scares people or where it gets complicated is the filings. But again, that's not overly complicated. Are they federally regulated or just state regulated? Then that kind of lets you know where you need to go filing wise. So it's not wildly complicated, and maybe that's just my ignorance because it's second nature to me.
Yeah, well, I also found it interesting that going to somebody like having the language in the actual industry is something that you prioritize over almost anything else. And from dealing with trucking businesses, right? Like that must mean something to them more so than again a deeper insurance knowledge per se. Is that something that people maybe underestimate and just how deep that sort of industry language is?
Probably so, and obviously, there's rabbit holes you go down, and I think that's another thing that gets complicated on the trucking is the exclusions, like, and that's something that again you teach as long as you understand the risk and understand what the coverage there. It's not overly complicated. You just need to be competent in understanding the risk, and again, the insurance side is really simple, in my opinion.
Well, now, and I guess you're making it sound almost too easy, Jeffrey, is because I've always heard like, it's not something you want to dabble in. And is there, I guess, reason for pause for somebody that would just be dabbling? Like, is there things that are
Yeah,
easy to
because
mess up?
yeah, if you don't understand it all, there's a lot of harm you can do and trouble you can bring if you don't have a risk properly insured. But that's anything from your basic home and auto, to trucking. It's just bottom line, you got to know the exposures that your job is to protect. So as long as you understand the exposure there, in my opinion, it's not much more difficult than any other industry or line of business.
What's your sort of bread and butter in terms of account, like size, type? Like, what are you looking for? Like, how are you going out and looking for new business and handling these accounts maybe that you
Yeah,
do
so
have?
that's kind of, we're kind of riding. It's this part of the wave right now. What I call the COVID years were good for us because there was so much inbound. During the COVID years, freight rates were up here at, $4+ a mile. And so a lot of owner operators that maybe worked for motor carriers or bigger fleets saw that, $4 plus a mile. And at the same time, simultaneously, fuel, diesel was averaging, 2.25. Okay. So you had, I'm talking about tons of volume. I've seen the numbers. I can't remember them now, but how many new, DOT and MC numbers were assigned during those COVID years. But we grew, 50% in 2020, 50% in 2021, just because freight rates were here, fuel was here, insurance was in the middle. Well, now 2023 was punch in the face because fuel, diesel spiked, and almost simultaneously freight rates dropped. So you had all these guys get into the business that their business plan, or probably lack of, was on $4 freight rates, which is how they get paid by the mile, and then $2 fuel. So when those flipped, their second, their biggest expenses are their equipment, their insurance, and their fuel. One of their biggest expenses doubled, and then how they get paid was cut in half. So we're kind of seeing 2023 was a fallout of that. All that to say, we're having to, we had all we could handle on inbound during COVID years. So now we're back to outbound. And for us and my agency, we're 10 years old. So we're kind of transitioning to more small fleet. Not that we won't still take care of the mom and pop, but those are the ones that are barely making it right now. So just longevity of my agency, unfortunately, I don't see a lot of those making it just because of the nature of the industry right now. So kind of a sweet spot for us is really anything, 3 or 4 power units up to 50 units. We've got a pretty broad range there. Most of our insurance carriers are gravitating towards the more vanilla motor carrier. So just somebody hauling dry van commodities, which is basically grocery, and then just basic flatbed loads, equipment, building material. So tank risk seemed to be difficult. Anything hazmat's always been difficult just because of the limits those guys are required to carry. But all that to say, we're going back to more of an outbound approach, which is hitting all the things: email, direct mail, cold calling, and all our email and the postcards and all that, and content that we try to put out is just more or less our billboard. That way, when they get the phone call, it may trigger some name recognition, and we can have a conversation from there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, talk to me a little bit about that transition or sort of realization of like stepping up and specifically focusing on that sort of small fleet, saying, maybe we can't handle like you said, the businesses that are maybe a little too volatile if they're going to be sticking around. And I guess on the other side of that too is when you're looking at those fleets, is there a risk reward in terms of, like you said, the tanker stuff that might be a little more risky? Is there something that you like to focus on that maybe has a nice premium attached to it, but at the same time is just risky enough that you can sort of have an easier time handling it?
Yeah, and unfortunately, I mean, all these guys they're paying way more, than they should or used to. I can remember in 2010 we were writing primary liability on average at like $4,200, a tractor. Now, probably my best rate's around $8,500 on that liability. That's a best rate. Average is probably 11 to 12, and then new in business is 17 plus. There's a lot of meat on the bone premium wise, but that's why current freight rates and fuel the math just doesn't math for a small operation that's already got a small margin. So that's part of what's when I step back and look at business model for my agency for the next 10 years, what's going to sustain us until we get into another vertical is partnering with quality operations that are more of a business operation, not just a unfortunately, mom and pop, the great truck driver, but may not have a great business plan or great money manager, and can't ride out these dips that we're in. Which unfortunately, this dip seems to be lasting a while, and probably will. So that's part of when I step back and look at what 2023 was for us. Is all right for the longevity for our next 10 years. We need to try to partner with more business minded operations.
Kind of continuing that thread of like stepping up to the small to mid-sized fleets and talking about speaking the language. Did you notice like a different level of lingo? Like did you have to adjust how you're talking to these guys a little bit? And I'd love for
Um,
you to run down sort of your key like phrase, like what gets you in the door, what establishes your credibility sort of right away to let them know what you're
Yeah,
doing.
no, I wouldn't say I really have to change up how I speak to them because honestly, the operation that's 30 or 40 trucks now, he started out just a one truck. Odds are the majority of these guys started out a small operation. They end up getting a contract, doing good work, and just organically growing. So that's kind of our market. We're not going after large, hundreds of power units of fleets that are more enterprise. That's not us. We could handle those, but that's not our what we go after. So to answer that question, I mean, the talking to them's the same, but you can have more of a business conversation. That guy that's out driving his truck, he's dispatching himself, he's paying his bills. As far as insurance goes, he's just worried about the cost of it. He just wants the cheapest. And which I get, I understand a dollar is a dollar running a business. I'm guilty of the same. You're more small to mid fleet, they're going to look more at the insurance carrier. How hands on are they or aren't they? How quick are they to just lay down and pay out a claim, or do they fight it? So you can look at more of those things. It's not just price driven with what we're pursuing. And as far as how we approach it, a lot of companies, as far as the motor carriers, are with a good insurance company and with a good agent. And so that's usually we'll preface it with like, look, you've been in business. That's why you're getting all these phone calls. We know you have an agent that you're probably happy with. Our approach is just to see if there might be any markets that we have that your agent isn't working with, or if there's anywhere we can help, possibly on price while not sacrificing coverage and that business needs. I just had a call with my outbound rep yesterday. I was like, look, we're sorting. And that's the mentality I've had to take. The majority of these operations that we want to do business with are in good shape. But we want to plant that seed for when that situation changes and just sort through the ones that are already, not in a great situation. They have no clue who their agent's shopping them with or what that renewal's looking like, and are tired of getting stuck with the last minute, surprise renewal. We try to come in with a transparent, basic renewal process is kind of my foot in the door is, hey, whether you work with us or not, kind of here's our process to give you control, you as the business owner and the owner of that policy, to give you control of this process and know if you even need to shop. If your agent's already working with the top 10 carriers, there's no need me getting involved as long as you're happy with your agent. And I'm going to gladly step back. I'm not going to try to force that when you're in good shape. But I want to plant that seed because you never know, that agent may retire. Could be a change in service rep that doesn't go well. Could be a change in gosh, I mean, you look at how many insurers are getting out of the transportation space. You just never know. So that's all we do is plant seeds and try to find people that could use our help.
Yeah, and that's definitely an interesting approach. I guess I have to know then is like, what's the average amount of time it takes for that seed to bear fruit, if you will?
Could be years. I've got some accounts that I've been, pursuing since I started this agency 10 years ago. There's one account in particular, it's probably 3 or 4 years. I was just, every year about, 90, 120 days out from renewal, I was checking their temperature. Hey, just touching base, know you've been in good shape. Well, on year 3 or 4, they were very frustrated with their agent. Their agent had actually retired. So they just had been handed down to somebody within the agency to take care of them, and they weren't being taken care of. And on that one, they were where they needed to be. I was very transparent on our first call. I was like, look, carrier wise, insurer wise, I think you're in the right spot. But let's talk out these frustrations you're having with your agent. We talked those out. I said, okay, well, here's how I think we could help you there. And so they ultimately hired me after they've been with that agency probably 15 years. So that was just, staying in their ear, so we put them in our email drips. I don't bombard an inbox. And usually when I put out something, it's a tip, trick, hack, to help with safety or something new on regulation or new ELDs or, something specific to their industry, not just insurance talk. It's just information that's helpful for them. So that's just one of the ways we stay in touch.
It's definitely like right place, right time. Sort of got to wait for your moment, your opening.
Yeah.
And I want to know. I don't know if like do you guys focus? Do you really dabble in anything else, or is it like you've sort of had to stay disciplined to just really primarily focus on the transportation, not get distracted? Like how do you balance that?
Yeah, foolishly, we're primarily trucking. We do have a good here in our small community. Your shelters and state farms, your captive Main Street agents. If they have something that they can't handle, they'll send it our way. Because we're primarily an E&S agency. So if it's something a little hairy, we're kind of the go-to in this area for a lot of those referral partners from the Main Street guys. So we've got a mixed bag of stuff. I've got some manufacturing, some commercial property, but we're probably 70 plus percent trucking, and the other 30 is just because of local community relationships and people that want us to handle things there, but it's all still commercial.
If you had to give sort of your one stamp of like I don't want to say approval, but just sort of guidance or caution for those agents that might have be in a position where hey Jeffrey's making this sound like it might be something I want to consider.
Yeah.
What are you telling them, and what's the one thing above all else that you would want them to know?
So yeah, you're right. As simple as I make it sound, you do want to understand the industry, and there's so many trucking, newsletters that you can subscribe to just to be in the know on what these guys are dealing with. So I'll probably get 10 different, newsletters a week or month from different trucking publications, and I'll just, read the high points, hit the headlines, just to see if there's anything I need to know about or if there's anything that I can communicate, to our network. And it's slipping my mind right now, but it's not the TRS designation, but there's a group out of Florida that kind of has a trucking insurance program.
I've talked to the guy. We've had him on the
Tommy's
podcast.
his top
I've
Tommy.
talked to Tom. Yeah, we've had Tommy on the podcast.
Yeah, so he
Uh,
seems to run a really. If I were new coming in, I had no trucking background, but like that's what I wanted to get into, 100%, I would get into his program. Just 'cause I think he really goes through all the coverages, the filings, everything in depth. And it's something I've looked at, but after being in 15 years, I just hadn't slowed down to take the time to go there. And it'd probably be beneficial for me, somebody that's been in this long. It's just one of those things I hadn't made a priority. But if I were new, 100%, I would look into it.
all right, Jeffrey. Well, I've got three more questions for you, sir.
All right.
And the first one is, what's one thing that you hope you never forget?
Oh, man. What's one thing I hope I never forget? That's a tough one because there's so many things that I think of. I initially think to my kids, what's one thing I'd want to pass down to them? And I'll tell you what keeps recurring in my mind is be kind. I believe in that karma lady, and I think that's kind of part of our outbound is just be kind and treat people right. It always has a way of working out if you do that.
Now, on the other side of that, what's one thing you still have yet to learn?
That's a good one. Might need to bring my staff in and ask them that. What am I stubborn about? What have I not learned? What have I not learned is that I'm not the best at everything. As an agency owner, I hold on to a lot of things that my team can probably do better than me. But in my mind, I do it the best. So yeah, I've not learned that I'm not the best at everything, as odd and egotistical as that sounds.
All right, Jeffrey. Last question to you, sir. If I were to hand you a magic wand of sorts to reshape, change, alter, speed up, really any part of insurance, what's that
Mhm.
thing? Where is it going? And what's it doing?
I would like to, especially in my world, be directly connected to the carriers. I have to get my submission together. I send it to RPS as the broker, who then sends it to ABC companies, to those underwriters. And it's got to come back to the broker, got to come to me. So in my world, in the trucking world, there's a few options that have created that technology, but there's no direct. There's a breakdown in time. There's always a breakdown in communication. So if I could have a magic wand, it would be a direct connection to more carriers.
Jeffrey, this has been fantastic, sir. I'm going to leave it right there.
All right, fair enough. I appreciate you having me on.